Hello, you're very welcome back to Fate Matters. My guest last week was wealthy at 19, a heroin addict sleeping under a bridge at 25, and today is a priest. His name is Father Michael Joseph Rourke. His story is the definition of the meaning of rock bottom. Today, I take up the conversation where we left off last week. Well, here we are again, Father Michael. If you like, could you recap a little bit, go back over to where we were?
Absolutely. So just to put in context, we're right around May of 2006, when I finally got enough courage, grace perhaps, to call my dad and say I need help. Again, they're halfway across the United States at this point, so my brothers scooped me up, threw me on an airplane. I had no idea what was happening. I was very, very sick to the point of hallucinating and near death, really. And all of a sudden, I get off the airplane and I'm in this airport in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I see my parents waiting for me, about 100 yards away. And I remember feeling just overwhelming guilt and shame and embarrassment. And how was I going to explain myself? And um, fortunately, my shame and my confusion was totally eclipsed by my parents' love and mercy. Really, you can think of the story of the prodigal son. It's very important in my life. So, they had every right to cast me off, condemn me. I took my dad's inheritance. I went to live in the world in a pigsty, and now I come crawling back. And rather than shame me, they did exactly what the story talks about. They put a robe on my shoulders and sandals back on my feet. They stood me up. Why? Because our son who was dead has come back to life again. So my parents saw this as a direct blessing of God and the fruit of their prayers for the last 3 years. So they take me home back to their apartment in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And then we had to confront the fact that detox and rehab is kind of a tricky industry here in the United States, especially when you don't have health insurance, you're from out of state, there's a lot of problems. So they were calling all of these retreat center or rehab centers, and they wanted tens of thousands of dollars. And some of them were saying it's like a 2 month, 3 month, 6 month waiting period to even get in. And my parents are desperate. They're like, our son is like having seizures on the couch right now. He needs treatment immediately. We have no
Because
money.
you were detoxing from heroin.
And multiple other substances, but mainly heroin, yes. So I
Yeah,
was
so
like
you,
moments away from death. And so my parents do what they do best. They went back to prayer and they got on their knees and started praying a rosary. And then the next click of the mouse brought them to a website for a place called Genesis. So they call this place, new creation, new beginning. And it was about 10 miles away from the house. They called and said, we've got a bed for him immediately. Oh, and by the way, it's totally free. So it's like too good to be true. Well, kind of was. So this was a place in downtown Milwaukee. It's a state-run detox facility. It's the kind of place like uh, the cops drop off, drunks and drug addicts and prostitutes at all hours of the night. So it's kind of a revolving door thing, but it's run by the state. Um, and totally free. And it was a horrific experience on one level, as you can imagine, but it saved my life. And I was in there for a while and I got the medical care that I needed. And probably most importantly, my time there, I was introduced to the 12-step recovery program and the 12-step spirituality of AA and Narcotics Anonymous. And so I got the tools to reconnect with a higher power. I didn't know what that meant at this point in my life, but I realized that I was stuck and I needed something greater than myself, greater than my addicted subjective ego to liberate me from this insanity that I was living. And so after my time in this rehab facility, my parents finally come to pick me up one day. Now, this is the first time in over 3 years I'm able to see my parents sober because it was kind of chaotic as they were throwing me into rehab, right? And I didn't remember much of that. So my parents are waiting for me in the parking lot, and I come walking outside, and they said, "So, what's the first thing you want to do now that you're sober?" Interesting question. And I said, I don't agree with it. I don't understand it. I'm certainly not going to join it, but I think I want to go to your church just once. This is my first cogent thought. And in hindsight, I made that request because I was a miserable person. My parents were happy people. So it was a very primal thing. I was just sick of being miserable, and I wanted to see if maybe they had the answer to happiness. So my parents, of course, were like, well, we got one shot at this. So they threw me in a car and they took me to a noon mass at this beautiful basilica in downtown Milwaukee. And it's one of these like over the top, like Roman kind of basilicas and, beautiful artwork everywhere. It's like heaven on earth. So they take me into this 12 o'clock mass, and my parents go up to the front pews to pray the liturgy. And I just kind of sat in the very last pew of this church. I still got the hospital band around my arm. I'm just minutes out of rehab. And I'm just sitting back there, just watching this kind of spectacle take place. And I was just thinking about my life and begging God to reveal himself to me. And so this strange thing happens. This priest, this is my first time seeing a priest, standing at this altar, and he holds up this cup and this piece of bread, and he said the most ludicrous thing I had ever heard. He says, "Behold the Lamb of God. Behold him who takes away the sins of the world." And I remember sitting in this back pew thinking, how could that possibly be true? I mean, just look at the sins of the whole world. Look at the sins that I carry in my own heart from these last 3 years. There's absolutely no way this is possible. But I'm willing to test that. And so I was at least open. I came with a little bit of openness and willingness to that mass. And I said, look, I don't know if what that priest said at the altar is true, but I'm going to find out for myself. And so this launched me on a campaign of reading everything I could about church history and about the Catholic faith. And I'm on this search for meaning and happiness and contentment in life. And so my dad runs this Catholic bookstore, so he's just feeding me with all kinds of great spiritual reading and yada yada. And so I made the decision. I said, okay, I've kind of read myself into some understanding of the faith, and um, I I came to a point where this man Jesus Christ was either who he says he was, or he was a terrible, horrible con man, and so I chose to believe that he was telling the truth about himself. So I entered the RCIA process to officially become Catholic, and
And here we don't have RCIA. Would you explain what it is?
yes, well, here it's now OCIA, formerly known as RCIA. It's the Rite of Christian Initiation for Adults. So it's adults who have been perhaps baptized, like myself, but need to convert to the Catholic tradition. And so it's a series of classes and formal studies, typically at a parish, that prepares us for full initiation into the church. So I was preparing to receive the sacraments of confirmation in my first Holy Communion. And of course, part of that, preparing for that, is my first confession. So during this process of my formation to come into the church, I had to make my first confession. And I met a very holy priest, and he was very gentle with me. And my first confession was nearly 6 hours long. And it was the most
6 hours long.
6 hours long. I think we took a lunch break. He prepared me a week ahead of time. He gave me a stack of notebooks and says, I just want you to write down everything. Go back in your mind year to year to year that you can remember, and just let's get rid of all of it. And he sat with me and we wept together, and we just purged all of that into the mercy of God. And I got to tell you, that was one of the most amazing experiences of my life. When I got the words of absolution said over me, I felt uh, like I was rebaptized in a way. It felt just totally cleansed and healed. And so I was prepared to enter the church. So on Pentecost, Sunday, I received the sacrament of confirmation. I was sealed with the gift of the Holy Spirit and received my first Holy Communion. So you can imagine my parents, right? They've just seen this prodigal son come back to life. I went to rehab. I've spent the last year forming myself to become a Roman Catholic. I just received these sacraments at this beautiful mass. So we're driving home on the freeway. And my mom is like on cloud nine, oh, my son, and wasn't that a beautiful mass? And we're just, and all the feel goods are flowing in the car. And we're driving about 70 miles an hour on the freeway. I said, yeah, mom and dad, that was a beautiful mass. That's the kind of mass I think I'll celebrate someday when I'm a priest.
What?
Yeah. And
Say
so
that again. Say
I
that
said,
again.
I think that might be the kind of mass I'd like to celebrate when I'm a priest someday. And my
Okay.
parents, they almost drove the car off the freeway, right? They couldn't believe what they were hearing. And they were like, "What are you saying?" And I said, "Well, I didn't want to say anything because this was a very private thing, but since I started this journey of becoming Catholic and learning more about Jesus and the church, I realized that first mass, like if that's true, if this Eucharist is true, then I need to be as close to that mystery for the rest of my life. There's no in between for me. Like it's either true or it's not. And if it's true, that has humongous consequences for me. And I feel like I have been liberated from the gates of hell. And the only response that I can think of is to give my entire life over to the service of God and his people as a priest. And so we get home and they're like, well, this is crazy. So then this started my whole discernment process. And I found this great group of men called the Capuchin Franciscans. And so I joined the Capuchin Franciscan Order, did my undergraduate degree in philosophy, finished that in 2015, then went to seminary and got my master's degree in divinity or theology. Graduated in 2019, was ordained to the diaconate. Then a year later, I was ordained to the priesthood. And so I remember getting up off of the floor after they pray the litany of the saints over us, as we're being ordained priests. And I was just weeping and weeping. And I get up and I turn to my mother, and she gives me this hug and she holds me so close and she says, Michael Joseph, this is the best life for you because you're going to help so many people. She goes, God will use every single ounce of your suffering to help some other soul that's still stuck.
Praise
And
God.
that has proven to be absolutely true. So then I guess I'm a glutton for punishment. So a couple years ago, I went back to school and I went to the University of Pennsylvania and got another graduate degree in psychology. And currently, and for the past 2 years, why I'm here in Pennsylvania, I work at a place called the St. John Vianney Center. So we are a world-renowned psychiatric and behavioral health center that treats only priests and religious. So I am a full-time spiritual director and I teach psychology to priests and religious who are suffering in their vocations or many of whom have addictions. So now I'm able to walk with these men and women as they are liberated from the grips of alcoholism or drugs or whatever's going on in their life. So it's an amazing life, David, and that's where I'm at today. I love being a priest, and I love being alive, and I love sharing the good news.
And you must love confession, hearing confessions.
Yeah, it's the most awesome experience. I mean, everything about being a priest is awesome. I mean, just getting to journey with people in their highs and in their lows and everywhere in between. Of course, celebrating any of the sacraments is great, but in the sacrament of confession is a very humbling experience to remind people of God's mercy and love and that no one is too far gone. You're just one confession away from deep holiness. I mean, it's that easy, and it's a beautiful thing.
Tell me, would you go back to when you've just left rehab? Did you feel the urge to go back to drugs at any stage?
Absolutely. Yeah, for a while there, certainly, this temptation or the addicted mind constantly wants to return because especially with things like opioids, they're a very powerful chemical. And I had An addiction specialist once told me when you just go from using constantly to not, it's like somebody reaches into your brain and plucks out your best friend. And so everything in your neurochemical makeup, your brain is saying, I need to return to that best friend, right? And so you will do all kinds of crazy stuff to get that back. So, of course, the temptations have been there, continue to be there at times. I mean, I've been in recovery 19 years now, and it's one of those things, like we say in the world of 12 steps or Narcotics Anonymous, we do one day at a time. I thank God that I'm sober today.
But
Uh,
wasn't it sort of suddenly click and you were totally free and forgot all about it?
yeah, no, no. I mean, I have more space between that period in my life and today, but I know that I'm an addict, right? There's something going on inside of me that has been marked by this experience,
Yes.
and so I have to be very cautious, about my life, and continue to lean into God and grace and prayer and the sacraments and self-care and community and do all of these things, work my recovery program constantly, stay accountable because I'm vulnerable, and that's
And
just part of it.
and tell me, what would you say to somebody who's listening to the show or later watching the podcast? Um, what would you say to somebody, some young fellow now who, in Ireland there's a pub culture with a lot of drink. It's sort of part of our setup here. It's a social life, isn't the pub? What would you say to a person who starts sort of, with the drink and then what people call recreational drugs, which sounds very harmless?
Mhm.
What would you say to them if somebody's listening who has started in on drugs? And also, I'd like you to speak to somebody you used the word promiscuity. I heard you speak once in an interview you gave, said you were promiscuous.
Mhm. Mhm.
And people, in other words, nowadays, young people are sleeping around, as we say.
Sure.
What advice would you give to both these situations of beginning to take drugs, recreational drugs, and sleeping around?
Mhm. And very much the same in the culture here in the United States. So we are the same in that respect. First, I want to give a shout out to one of my spiritual heroes, a man from Ireland known as Venerable Matt Talbot.
Yes.
So first off, if they, have internet, go look up this man. His story is incredible, and I recommend this as one of our holy helpers as we journey from addiction towards sanity. But beyond that, what are young people looking for nowadays? And I think it's really the same in every age. We're looking for deep meaning and purpose. We are, and we're looking for it at the bottom of a cup. We're looking for it in drugs we use. We're looking for it in relationships. We're looking for something to give our life deep existential meaning. Unfortunately, St. Augustine was correct. Our hearts are restless until they rest in God. There is nothing that is going to provide that deep sense of total contentment, joy, happiness, meaning, purpose um, in the world. We're just not created for that. Everything points us to the fact that we are pilgrims and strangers on this human experience. And so, what are they looking for? They're looking for deep communion, uh, deep love, deep passion in life. And unfortunately, we trade that in for cheap thrills that promise us this illusion of happiness, meaning, contentment, and leave us totally empty at the end of the day. For some of us, we're a little harder headed, so it takes a little time to figure that out. For me, I was able to find that sense of communion, community, love, purpose, mercy uh, in my relationship to Jesus Christ and his church. And that opened up a whole new horizon of meaning in my life that's
Where
indescribable.
where should a young person begin if they hear, okay, well, that sounds great, but where do I begin? How do I begin?
First, I would ask them to look at paragons or examples of people with deep, healthy meaning and purpose in their life and see what they're doing, and emulate them, right? We need to look at people like I looked at my parents and said, "Well, I'm a miserable person. I'm chasing all of these illusions and shadows, and it's left me totally empty at the end of the day. When I put my head on my pillow at night, I'm empty. My soul is exhausted." My parents wake up every single day in love and in commitment to one another, and they're content with having little, and they're just living great lives. And so that was at that very raw moment, I'm looking at people who are living well. And I said, I just want to
and
be
have
like that.
found and have found happiness in their heart.
Have found happiness. And it ain't in all the stuff the world says is going to make them happy, right? It's in living simple, honest, merciful lives in a committed relationship, living their vows every single day. And now, me as a priest, I still look at my parents who love each other in sickness and in health, for richer, for poorer, for better, for worse. And I continue to emulate them. Why? Because I know I can't do this on my own, and I need to surround myself with these positive examples.
And the other question, I'd like to go back to the moment when you made your confession, your 6 hour confession. What would you advise people? Two things. First, what were your feelings when you left that confession that day, the day after, the day after? What did you feel? That's the first question. And the second question is, what would you advise people listening to this who haven't gone to confession? Because many people think confession, oh, it's not necessary. I didn't kill anybody this week or this year, sort of thing.
Yeah.
We all fall into that, I suppose. Uh, they're the two questions. Could you answer them,
Mhm.
Paula?
What did I feel? I felt about 1,000 pounds lighter, I guess is the best way to describe it. Like I said, it felt like I was rebaptized in a way, completely fresh start, which was a strange experience for me. Uh, but, and this is ancient wisdom, right? The church has got it right, I think. And this was something else that was confirmed when I was learning my 12-step program in recovery. So, step 4 of AA says we make a fearless moral inventory of our lives. And then step 5 says we confess to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs. Okay, so this same world is being used even in the recovery world. Why? Because there is something deeply cleansing about bearing our souls to another living human being. To know that there is another human being on this planet that knows all of me. I can't explain that. It works. And that's a whole thing different than just talking to God, which is great. We should do that. But there is something deeply psychologically, spiritually healing about bearing our souls to another human person. And then within the Catholic Church, we can absolve those sins. So it's like bonus. We give you the gold seal of approval and say, on behalf of God and the church, you are completely absolved.
And that
Um,
comes directly from Jesus.
correct.
That's yeah.
Yep. So, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And no, it's not just for if you've killed somebody this week or done some horrendous thing. This is a deeply healing sacrament, and it should be used to keep us current in our world so we can continue to examine our lives and see what's leading me towards happiness, meaning, and purpose or not. And so it's not just about these major things that I've done wrong, but continuing to humble ourselves with God and another human person to say, I am on this slow rolling pilgrimage towards healing and life and Christ. So it's a good practice.
Well, Father, I would like to continue for another few hours because I know you've a lot to say, and I would love to hear you. I'd continue listening to you, but I suppose you have some other things to do, I'm sure. So you must be a very busy man. And I really thank you so much
Well, thank
for
you,
taking
Dave.
out this time for the blessing for myself and for the people who will watch this and hear this.
Yeah.
So may God bless you and keep you and look after you. and may your testimony reach many people all over the world.
We pray.
Thank you so much, Father.
Thank you, David.
Thank you
God
so
bless
much.
you and all your listeners.
Well, that's it for today. If you would like to share this or any of our previous programs, you will find them on the audio podcast Finding Happiness on drbhennessy.com, YouTube Music, YouTube, and Spotify. I'm looking forward to having you back with me again next week at the same time. But for now, good night and God bless.